Thank you for joining us on the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. And here's your host, Chris Cebollero.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, once again, it's time for another great episode of the Ultimate Leadership Podcast. I've got to tell you, our next guest is truly a living legend and one of my heroes. I got to tell you, when I was watching this guy back on TV, it was marveling about his strength and his skill, but more importantly, his heart. And our next guest has traveled the world in the name of sports, representing not only himself, but the country in some of the biggest MMA's events. He went to war with the likes of Royce Gracie and Dan Severn and Tito Ortiz. He was elected to the UFC Hall of Fame in 2003. He was the four-time UFC heavyweight champion, the first UFC super fight heavyweight champion. And if you're a fan, you know that turned into the heavyweight championship. He's also the host of the World's Most Dangerous podcast, and go over to his website and become a fan of that. Please join me in welcoming the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Ken, thanks for joining us on the show.
Hey, thank you very much.
It's truly an honor. And as I mentioned, as you know, watching your career from the beginning, it was amazing to me the things that you did in the ring. And truly, you were one of my heroes as this sport started out. So thank you very much for that.
I appreciate that, man. And I tell you what, it was definitely in that time. It was very, very unique and very dangerous. And I don't think people realize during that time, there was no rules, no time limit, man. There was no weight division. Anything went.
Yep. And it was truly amazing, but that's where it grew into, and truly a pioneer in that sport. But Ken, I really want to kind of focus on, you know, the things that you overcame, and, you know, you think about some of the things that you had to go through, right? Not only in life, but really in the sport. You've been an inspiration to so many people over your career. What is the secret to your motivation, knowing that so many people were looking up to you for guidance, inspiration, and motivation? I mean, how did you do it?
Yeah, you know, I think it comes from my background and my upbringing, or lack of upbringing. You know, I was in and out of the juvenile system. I didn't really have parents to look at and be guided by. I was guided by the street, juvenile hall probation officers, counselors. So you can kind of understand a little bit about my anger and my frustration at the world. It's because there was really nothing there, at least in my mind, that I felt unfair. It was, you know, the things that I had to do as opposed to everyone else. So it was a lot of frustration and anger. But you know, when it comes to, you know, that success and how I was able to overcome that, was I always thought to myself was like, I'm better than that. For whatever reason, I had it in my head that I'm better than this, than just being that person I was. And I latched onto things that I felt I was good at. And fortunately for me, it was sports. And once I found out that I would be treated differently towards coaches and teachers and people wanting to keep me on the field or whether on the wrestling mat because of my athletic ability, I latched onto it and I used it as an opportunity for me to get where I needed to go. And on top of it, after I got to a certain point when people started to look up to me, then there was another responsibility. And I remember I didn't have that growing up. I didn't have somebody to look at and have some sort of role model, you know, I didn't have that. And so when I had that opportunity and there was people literally looking at me and telling me that I was an inspiration to them, I took that serious. Because I know where I was at, and I know that I had to have people help me get to where I got. And those were people that took care of it, like my dad who adopted me, you know, and my mom who adopted me. And, you know, there was people in my life through coaches and different things that helped me get where I was at. So I felt like when that started to turn on me, where people started looking up to me, I felt a responsibility that I had to also try to at least motivate other people to be who they can be. And the things that I've always believed in and always told people was that, you know, nobody, and I absolutely mean nobody, no family member, no guardian angel, nobody is going to do it for you. You have to do it yourself. I don't care what situation you're in, where you're at, whether it's your mind or your body that has to do it, whether your mind or your body has to do it, or both, something has to give. And it's either going to be you failing or you succeeding. So I always tell people, you can't rely on someone else to do it for you. You have to do it yourself. Now you'll get opportunities, you'll get motivation, you'll get people wanting to help you, but you got to do the work.
And I think that's one of the things that sometimes we forget, right? I mean, we think about, you hear it all the time, opportunity only knocks once. Well, just because opportunity knocks doesn't mean you're ready to go through the door. You've got to be able to prepare yourself to say, when opportunity finally knocks, that you're able to put yourself in a position to be successful. But more importantly, don't wait for the door to knock. You've got to build your own doors in life, and you got to get through them. And when you think about the things that you went through, it just wasn't physical. I mean, you were a physical specimen. I was like, this guy is just huge back in the day and, earlier on, but your mind had to be mentally tough as well. And how do you balance the strength of your body to ensure that your mind has to be doubly strong to do some of the things that you want to get done?
Yeah, that's really tricky because, I see a lot of guys who are physically strong. Like they're physically strong, but yet you can mentally break them. And therefore, that strength means nothing because when their mind goes, the strength goes. So I think that your mind is first. You have to have a strong mind. And the way you do that is you have to, I go back to the same thing, got to believe in yourself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, I don't care how many people believe in you, it's not going to work because you have to believe in yourself. And so therefore, we go back to that same issue again, right? It's like, nobody's going to believe in you and get it done for you. You have to do it. Therefore, your mind has to be strong. And how you keep that mind strong is that you look at where you're at and understand who you are. And that you, from that point on, and it's not you have to believe what you're capable of doing. And again, it starts with your mind. It really does. It starts with your mind and everything else will follow. But your mind has got to be in a position to where you feel good about yourself and you feel good about what you're doing. If you don't feel good about that, then maybe you need to look elsewhere to find some positivity.
And I think that's really important. And we've got to be the ones to stoke our own fire with that desire. As we go through life, and you talked about a lot of things, we always come across those speed bumps and those hurdles, and we get derailed from where we want to attain our ultimate success. In your career as a champion, I mean, you've won some great battles, you've lost some great battles. And what advice do you have for the people who come across those challenges in life and they just want to give up and say, maybe this isn't for me?
Yeah, first of all, when you're in that position, you've already gone that way. You've already went down this road, right? So what you have to do is finish the job. Whether it ends up in a negative or a positive, you can't just say I quit in the middle of trying to accomplish something. What you got to do is finish it. And you get to a certain point where you can't go any farther, or maybe you've lost interest, maybe you're not into it, but you can't quit in the middle. Because then it builds in this thing in your mind where it's okay now to quit at any part. It's like training for a fight. You signed to do a fight. You got a 3-fight deal. You get 2 fights into it. And then you realize, wait, you lost 2 of them. You realize, well, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, finish it. Finish it. I mean, you committed to it. Finish it. Then make your changes. So I think there's timing and a purpose for everything. But if you get used to just quitting on something because it didn't work out, then you're never going to know whether or not because a lot of people mistake not being into it or not wanting it as not being successful. So now all of a sudden they want to quit because they're afraid of failure. You can't be afraid of failure. You've got to keep pushing through because you may get past it and go, wow, I really didn't feel that way. It was just that maybe things weren't going well for me at that point in time. So that's why I always think it's important that finish it. Don't quit in the middle things. Finish it because you don't know where it's going to lead you once you do.
And I think that that's great advice. And one of the things that we talk about all the time is, name the one thing you ever did the first time you did successfully, right? We fail at everything. And it's, we've been sold this book of goods that failure is bad. Ooh, we failed. We're learning when we fail. The failure comes from if you don't learn the lessons when those mistakes happen. And I think a lot of people lock themselves away. But, you've had the opportunity to represent yourself, represent your skills, and the United States all over the world. I talked about that in the beginning. Some folks are fearful to get outside their comfort zone and chase these dreams, right? So what advice can you share with the listeners about maybe gaining more self-confidence so they can travel the world and make their dreams come true?
Well, instead of telling them, I'm going to go through my direction of my career so people kind of see my mentality. It's like when I started first out, I started in pro wrestling. I went down to Nelson Royal School in North Carolina. I was down there for about a year, 2 years. I ended up getting the strap on me. I went to Baba's group in Japan. I did some wrestling there, was way behind the skill sets there, stayed over practices because I knew I needed to learn more. And when I left there after a 3-month tour, I ended up being as good as the rest of them because I stayed after practice and kept working. And then I went back. Then I found this thing called the UWF, which was where I saw guys fighting over there. It was like this hardcore hybrid pro wrestling style where it looked like they were fighting kicks, punches, submission skills, throws, suplexes. So I went down there to do that and immediately had success at that. And I kept thinking to myself, I went from pro wrestling to this hybrid pro wrestling. And even then I kept saying to myself, I want more. I wanted more. I loved it. I knew this is what I was going to do, but I wanted more. So then Pancreas came into style, where Funaki, Suzuki, and myself created this organization where now we were turning pro wrestling into a shoot or into it being real. And that's where we got Pancreas from, which was wrestling turned real. And so then I went into that and I thought, oh, this is it, man. This is it. This is the best there is in the world. And I was on top. I was a champion. I reached that level. And then I saw this thing, UFC. And it was another level. It was bare knuckle, closed fist, punching, no rules. And I was like, I want to do that. Now, most people would go, dude, you're already a champion. It's like, why would you go over there and risk that? Because in my mind, I would not be happy because people would say I was the best fighter in the world. And then other people would say, no, these guys are the best fighters in the world because they're bare knuckle. Where I would be, in reality, I am the best fighter in the world because I'm the champion. But now this guy's the best fighter in the world because he's champion over here. So really, who is the champion? And in my mind, I knew this. Like, if I was going to be looked at as the world's most dangerous man, the best in the world, right, I had to keep moving up. I couldn't be satisfied with just capturing a championship. It's not enough. And so I went into the UFC and I lost after being the champion. There was no champion in the UFC yet. It was just starting out. So I was the best in the world at mixed martial arts. Now, this was no holds barred. I went in there and I lost. And it hurt me and it hurt the organization. It hurt my reputation as being the best. And so I went back to training. Now, I could have tucked my head and went back to the organization and called it a fluke, whatever, but I didn't. I said I want him again. Even so much to where I wouldn't go into the finals to fight another human being because I wanted Royce Gracie because he dropped out. Then when I did get him, I trained and did everything I could, even though I was behind the 8 ball because I didn't have the skill sets he had. I wasn't as good as him. But I knew it. And so therefore I had to develop a plan that would put me in a position to be able to beat him. And I did. I took him 36 minutes and beat the crap out of him. That still wasn't enough. I had to solidify me being the best. And therefore I stayed longer and kept competing and became that champion. Yep. And it didn't stop there. I went into pro wrestling, challenged myself in another area. Here's what I'm trying to tell people is that the minute you think that you've reached the top, there's another mountain to climb. And there's a valley you have to go through to get to that other mountain. So therefore, you're going to come off your mountain and you're going to have to start over doing something else. Or even if you could go laterally across it, yeah, that's fine. But that mountain's still bigger than the one you're on. And if you don't live life this way, then you're going to just be mediocre. But if you want to be great and you want to be able to turn around and help other people, then you have to be that person, that figure that people look at and go, man, this guy is awesome. This guy's great. Because if you stay in one place, that greatness will fail. But if you keep rising to the stars, and the stars are forever, and you keep trying to accomplish more, then you will always be in a position to help other people become great.
Yeah, and I think that's, I mean, you just put a really big bow on that, right? I mean, you sum that up really well. Mountains and valleys, and keep climbing. There's always a bigger mountain, but it seems that we get complacent on where we are and we don't want to continue. And then all of a sudden we hate where we are. We don't know why. Well, we stopped. That's why. And I think that was a great lesson. You know, some of the things that you talked about, you know, in that becomes, you know, you talked about your upbringing. You talked about really kind of getting on a great path. And, you know, in leadership, we talk a lot about mentorship. And I'd really be interested to know that this is a really big component of developing yourself to that next level. You know, who in your career has been your biggest influence to you, your biggest mentor, and taught you? What was the lesson that they taught you that you still hang on to today?
Yeah, it's got to be my father. I mean, my adopted father. He has always been. I broke my neck in high school wrestling. I mean, I broke it. And they told me I never play contact sports again.
Wow.
And I remember this was back in 1982. And I remember my father, he wasn't my father at the time, but he was sitting in the hospital. I got the news. I was depressed. I mean, everything I had ever accomplished was through sports. That's how I became important. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he said, listen, you can lay there or powder, you can get up and do something about it, because no one's going to be able to, you're the only one that's going to change your direction. And of course, he wasn't telling me to go play sports because they were saying, you know, I was done. But what he was telling me, even though I took it the wrong way or the right way for me, was that what he was telling me was that, yeah, this is something that's happened, but who's going to change? Is the doctor going to change this? Am I going to change this? Is your friends? Who's going to change this? And when you look at it from 30,000 feet up and realize there's no one there but you, and you have all the opportunities in the world around you to be able to get yourself out of that position if you're willing to work for it. And that's literally how I took it. I was like, he's right. I was insulted. I wasn't angry. I was just like, he's right. It's like, I'm the only one that can change where I'm at. I'm the only one that knows what I'm willing to do to get to where I want to go. Nobody else knows me. And so therefore I took it that way. And I went and started training a year later, 2 years later, I'm playing football. Right. And so there's a lot of things in life that we go through that we look at and we just feel like, man, how am I going to get out of this? Trust me when I say this. If you're willing to get up off the ground and put one foot in front of the other, opportunities will show themselves. But if you stay in one spot, the opportunity is going to pass you by because you're never going to see them because you're not moving.
Yeah, and I think that goes really to the lesson as well, as nobody can tell you what you can do, right? I mean, here you are, you're a young man, you're laying in bed and you're upset about this, but you said, you know what? I'm going to give this a go. And look where you got to, man. Again, the pinnacle, the top of the mountain, you know. So Ken, I've talked about it. You know, you've been a great role model to me. I've watched you for a lot of years. And again, in the beginning, I was saying to myself, how can these guys do this? I mean, you know, I've studied martial arts and, you know, when I was in the, but I couldn't even think about matching that toughness. Right. So we've been talking a lot about lessons and leadership and so on and so forth. But I got to ask you, I mean, you're here on the show. So I got to ask you some of these questions about your career and fighting. I mean, so who's the guy? Who's that one guy that really tested? I mean, you went through war, Tito Ortiz and Dan Severn and Hoist Gracie, and who really tested your skills to the max and really kind of, helped you solidify becoming who you are today?
Yeah, you know, I always go back to this because I worked out with the Japanese a lot, and I spent 6 months in Japan training at dojos down there, and I had guys like Takahashi, who I would train with, and we went after one another. And he was a young boy, so I was working with him, building his skills, and he was tough as nails. And he helped me really, really kind of sharpen myself in my toughness. And then there was Funaki, who was really the guy that really showed me, even though he was younger than me, but he had a lot more. He was actually doing it longer than I was. And so when I went there, I went under his wing, even though Fujiwara helped me a little bit. Sammy Saranaka, who brought me in, those guys were instrumental in giving me the opportunities. But I would really say that Funaki was the one that really helped me develop as a fighter. Guys like Takahashi helped me while I was sparring with them, while I was in the ring with them, and helped me out a lot getting to where I was at. So, but Funaki, even when I fought him, because we had worked together, he was training me, he showed me all the stuff, he helped build my mind, my body, and I helped him with his body, getting him in shape, in a fighter shape. So we worked well together and got each other where we wanted to be. But he knew me really well because we worked together. Even Takahashi and I fought both those guys like 4 or 5 times. Those are the 2 guys I fought the most, Takahashi and Funaki. And I got the best of both of them. But I'll tell you, it was really hard because they knew what I was going to do. So when I went in to fight him, especially in the very first Pancrase event, where I fought Funaki in the main event, I had to completely change my setups because he would know every time I went for something. And so I had to change that. Even when I fought Boss, and I fought Boss twice, I beat him both times. And I remember I had to change my setups into knee bars because everybody knows everybody because they're learning from them. So I really had to really, buckle down and break down all my setups, and it got me the opportunity to beat Funaki because when I went for the choke, normally I would go for it and I would be more aggressive with it, and this time I kind of slid it in and I waited for him to relax, and then he relaxed, and then I was able to sink it in, thinking he would think that I wasn't in position. And if you watch it, you'll see there wasn't much movement, and I was just basically relaxing, and he relaxed. Once he relaxed, I sunk it in. And so there was a lot of disappointment, I know, on the Japanese side, because I'm sure that they wanted to, Funaki was the star.
Right.
They wanted him to win at least that first fight in Pancrase. And then we went to the tournament style, and I fought him in the second round or third round, something like that, and beat him there too. So, but again, like I said, he was one of the ones that knew everything I was going to do, and he challenged me all the way. Now, it's not to say is when I got later in my career, it was different though, because I didn't have the skill sets I had when my knees were good, when I was able to do my submissions. Because out of 24 submissions, out of 24 fights, I had 22 submissions.
Right. That was your thing.
Yeah. So I was, people talk about Hoist, but I had a higher percentage of submissions than Hoist did. Yeah. Because that was something that I did very well. Even though I had power in my hands, I just loved the percentage of winning with the submission as opposed to somebody getting lucky with a punch. Right. You can't get lucky with the submission. So there was a lot more sound groundwork and opportunity to get a win and not somebody get lucky on you. So, but Funaki, I would have to say, was the one that over the years and my time there was difficult when it came to fighting and game planning for him because he knew everything I was going to do.
Yeah, I got to tell you, watching your career and watching those fights and even talking to you today, even though we were really kind of focusing on your lessons learned, you give me still a lot of that inspiration. You've been a great role model to a lot of people. You've inspired me over the years. And I remember, after the fight with Tito Ortiz, I was going through a rough time. And I said, look what this guy just went through. Look what he just went through. And I'm going to sit here and complain about, this. Well, what right do I have? Right. So I want to thank you, Ken. But, I want to be respectful of your time. And I appreciate you taking your time out of your day to come and visit with the listeners. But, again, you have your podcast. Go on over there and check it out. But you want to talk a little bit about the Lions Den up there in Reno or anything you want to promote?
Yeah. I actually sold the gyms. I got out of there because now I'm actually doing more promotions. I'm in the fight game with Valor Bare Knuckle. We also have our website, valorbk.com, if you want to check out when our next fights are. Also, to my website, kenshamrock.com. We got a lot of stuff going on with reality shows. We got podcasts that we're doing. So you want to check out, see what it is that we're up to, go to kenshamrock.com. And really, that's about it, man. We've got a lot of stuff happening. So check out the website.
Awesome. And Ken, I want to thank you for joining us. Everybody out there, what can you take from this show? The lessons are endless. And here's the thing. This is not about the lessons. Be able to take a little chunk of something and put it into action. That's what we were talking about today. I want to thank my guest, Ken Shamrock. For everybody out there, this is Chris Cebollero. I look forward to chatting with everyone again real soon.
Thank you for joining us. The Ultimate Leadership Podcast is a production of ChrisCebollero.com. You can interact with us by email at ultimateleadership16@gmail.com. All rights reserved.